We now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join the Prime Minister in his words about the Clerk of the House? Mr. Speaker, I pay tribute to the police who tracked down the escaped terror suspect from Wandsworth prison last week. Despite being charged with terrorism and despite being a flight risk, he was not held in a Category A prison. Why not?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the police and their partners for their efforts to find and arrest Daniel Khalife. There is now an ongoing legal process that must be allowed to take its course. But I'd like to reassure the public that while these cases are extremely rare, the Justice Secretary has launched an internal investigation about how this could happen, as well as an independent investigation of the incident, so that we can learn the lessons from this case and make sure that it never happens again.
Keir Starmer.
The truth is they're presiding over mayhem in the criminal justice system. Only a few short months ago, Zara Alina's family said ministers had, and this is their words, blood on their hands after probation failures that led to her murder. So it beggars belief that we're back here once again. The Chief Inspector of Prisons said conditions in Wandsworth are so bad it should be shut down. The Chancellor is telling anyone who'll listen that he raised concerns months ago. Probation, school buildings, now prisons. Why does the Prime Minister keep ignoring the warnings until it's too late?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman with his background should know better that because of the wide variety. Because of the wide variety and considerable difference in severity of people charged under that Act, it is not and has never been the policy that they are all held in Category A prisons, something that I shouldn't need me to point out to him given his experience. But he talked about resourcing. I am happy to tell him that over the last few years, we have delivered an extra 4,000 new prison officers. Staffing levels at Wandsworth in particular are up by 25% in the past 6 years. And because we're boosting prison pay, we're also improving retention and at the same time investing £100 million to improve prison security with new measures like X-ray body scanners. But if he wanted to have a truly honest debate about this, perhaps he'd acknowledge that prison escapes under the Labour government were almost 10 times higher than under the Conservative.
I did say last week, and it will continue this week. Who wants to start this session by leaving? Please do so. I'm happy to help you on your way. Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, every week, whatever the topic, he paints this picture as if everything is great and fine out there. It's so at odds with the lived experience in the real world. Let me turn to another serious security concern. Some in this House face sanction, intimidation and threats from the Chinese state. When I asked the Prime Minister on Monday whether the Foreign Secretary raised the specific issue of the alleged spy arrested in March when he visited China a few weeks ago, the Prime Minister would only say that he raised that type of activity, but avoided specifics. So I asked the Prime Minister again, did the Foreign Secretary raise this specific case when he visited China? Yes or no?
Mr. Speaker, I'll refer to my previous answer where I've said very clearly that the Foreign Secretary raised these issues with the Chinese Foreign Minister who he met, as did I when I had my meeting with Premier Li over the weekend. But when it comes to China, Mr. Speaker, this government has put in place the most robust policy that has existed ever in our country's foreign policy. It is to protect our country for the values and the interests that we stand up for. It is to align our approach with our closest allies, including those in the G7 and the Five Eyes, and is to engage where it makes sense, either to advance our interests or, as I did at the weekend, to raise our very significant concerns. That is the right approach to China. It is one that is welcomed by each and every single one of our allies, and I'd be interested to know what he thinks that he would do differently.
Keir Starmer.
Well, that certainly wasn't a yes. And what he says now is totally at odds with the Parliament's Intelligence and Security Committee report of July this year. That set out that the government has no clear strategy when it comes to China, has failed to support the intelligence agencies and is leaving the UK severely handicapped in managing our future security. This has been raised time and time again. But yet again, the Prime Minister fails to heed the warnings and is now desperately playing catch-up. So will he finally commit to the full audit of UK-China relations, which so many in this House have so long demanded?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as always, the Leader of the Opposition is just playing catch-up and hasn't caught up with the reality of what's actually happening. He talks about the ISC report. Again, if he actually went through it, he would realise that it related to a period of investigations which was in 2019 and 2020. Since then, Mr. Speaker, we have launched a whole new integrated review refresh of our China strategy. It's published. We've put in place a range of new measures, including, for example, the National Security Protective Agency, which is staffed out of MI5, supporting businesses and organisations and being alert to the risk from cyber and from China. But if he wants to talk about foreign policy, Mr. Speaker, he should perhaps reflect on his own record, because this was the man who said he was 100% behind the former Labour leader, a person who wanted to abolish the army, scrap Trident and withdraw from NATO. It's clear what he did. He put his own political interests ahead of Britain's.
Mr. Speaker, probation, prison, schools, China, yet again inaction man fails to heed the warnings and then blames everyone else for the consequences. Mr. Speaker, on Sunday, the Home Secretary celebrated her first anniversary in post. That is, if you overlook the 6 days she missed when she was deemed a national security risk. In that year, 40,000 people have crossed the Channel on a small boat, and the taxpayer is now spending £6 million a day on hotel bills. He's failing to stop terrorists strolling out of prison, failing to guard Britain against hostile actors. He's completely failing to stop the boats. How can anyone trust him to protect the country?
Mr. Speaker, he talks about trust, he talks about action. Just today, this government is taking action to reform defective EU laws to unlock over 100,000 homes, boosting our economy, supporting jobs and ensuring that we can realise the aspirations of homeowners. Now, he talks about trust. He tried in this House to talk the talk on house building. But at the first sign of a cheap political hit, what did he do? He's caved in, Mr. Speaker. Rather than make the right long-term decisions for the country, he's taken the easy way out. It is typical of the principles-free, conviction-free type of leadership that he offers. Flip-flopping from being a builder to a blocker. Mr. Speaker, the British public can't trust a word he says.
Mr. Speaker, every week he comes here protesting that nothing's his fault, trying to convince anyone who's still listening that everything is great. The truth is, the floor fell in for millions of families because of their economic mayhem. The classroom ceilings collapsed because he cut vital school budgets. And now the walls of our national security have been breached because they've ignored repeated warnings. No one voted for these shambles. No one voted for him. So how much more damage do the British public have to put up with before he finally finds the stomach to give them a say?
Mr. Speaker, we are getting on for the British public just in the last week, announcing a new landmark deal for British scientists, attracting £600 million of new investment for our world-leading auto industry, and wages now rising at the fastest rate on record, Mr. Speaker. And where has he been this week? Locked away with Labour's union paymasters, promising to give them more power and scrap the laws that protect British families and their access to public services. It's clear it's only the Conservatives that are on the side of the hard-working British public.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Last week, with Yorkshire colleagues, I met with our local integrated care board to discuss plans for improving dentistry provision. But when surgeries suddenly closed to NHS patients without notice, as one in Harrogate did very recently, an immediate strain is put on local provision. Will the Prime Minister look at what can be done in these circumstances to ensure that no one is left without access to an NHS dentist?
Prime Minister.
My honourable friend is absolutely right to raise this, and we will look into this issue. He'll be reassured to know we're investing £3 billion a year into dentistry. There is no geographical restriction on which dental practice a patient may attend, and practices should keep all their records up to date, including whether they are accepting new patients. And typically where a practice ends a contract, NHS England and ICBs should work together to ensure that that funding is reallocated and patients continue to have access to NHS dental care.
SNP leader Stephen